Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chōten Podcast, where we speak with the leaders, innovators, and creators driving the future of business using tools like AI, social media, and the rest. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. I'm joined by Kari Sulenes, the CEO and founder of the Heartwood Collective. The Heartwood Collective is a strategic systems and coaching and leadership program that helps entrepreneurs systematize and really reach that next level in their businesses. Kari, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, Kari, well, let's get right into it. So tell us a little bit about the Heartwood Collective and how'd you get started with it?
Yeah, I think for this podcast and potentially the audience here, there are a couple of different angles that are interesting about the Heartwood Collective. One, maybe my experience leading the Heartwood Collective itself, but also the experience that we've had working with our clients who are also startups and VCs in this ecosystem. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how we got started and what we're up to now. About 10 years ago, I was finishing up my psychology doctorate, and I met a couple of venture capitalists. It was a totally new world for me. I was completely unfamiliar with the world of investing.
Yeah, very different than psychology.
I was really deep in like the healing world, and my friends are all therapists, and that's where I came from. But I met a couple of venture capitalists who were very interesting to me because they were starting a fund that was focused on investing in the human factors of their companies rather than only the business factors. And what I mean by that is they were actually providing a year of funding for the founders in their portfolio to get coaching and therapy, and saying, actually, that's the thing that we think is going to drive the return. Because especially in early stage investing, the people variable is the one that's the hardest to control. And so many of the companies fail because of people-related issues. In fact, there was a study that came out that we often quote. It's a Noam Wasserman study. It says about 60% of startups fail due to people-related issues. And so they said, what if we could actually shift fund dynamics by investing in the people themselves and their development and their self-awareness and their well-being? And so I was lucky enough to run across them while they were working on this project, and I joined as a consultant and then later joined as a partner in the fund and supported the two GPs at Alpha Bridge Ventures in creating a program that supported founders. And we got a little, this is like a chronic thing for me, my personality is that I like to say I'm kind of like a chronic overbuilder. And so I built a program that was way bigger and more robust than necessary for the fund that was, had two investments, and I built this entire program. And so we had some people interested who were running other funds. And so I started doing some work with some other funds and some other companies. And eventually we decided to spin it out as a separate company. And so that's how Heartwood Collective got started, was we actually grew from the fund, from that program, and then developed ourselves as a separate business that works with companies and funds all over the world.
Amazing. It's interesting how the paths are never really as they seem, right? I'm sure when you were finishing up your PhD in psychology, you weren't expecting to be here, right?
No.
Or maybe even when you started with that other fund, you probably didn't expect to be here. And it's amazing that you're at this point now. Tell us specifically, what sort of mindset is necessary to be able to jump from something like psychology to this?
I don't know if there's one kind of mindset, but I can tell you a little bit about my journey, which is that as a psychologist, my world was really about serving other people and taking my cues from the people around me, right? In fact, that's a huge strength as a therapist, is letting the client lead and being really attuned with them. And psychologists are notoriously bad business owners, and I think there's a really good reason for that, because the skill set that lends itself towards psychology is often in contrast with the skill set that makes people good at running a business. And so as I started finding myself increasingly in positions to lead this company, and I say that way because when I first started, I absolutely didn't want to do any of the coaching, and I absolutely didn't want to run the program. I just thought of myself as the researcher who was creating the foundation for it. And then as we spun this out as a separate company, I thought, well, I'll just lead it until we find like the real leader of this company. And so then I was looking around me always for who's going to lead this company. I hired a CEO, and that didn't work out. Then I hired a president, and that didn't work out. Then I was like, we're going to lead completely democratically. There's no leader, right? We're just like, it's a totally flat organization. And like everyone was confused and like nothing got done. And I had a number of people, I actually had a 360 evaluation done, and kind of everyone said, like, you're the leader of this organization, and you're not doing it. Like, you're there, and we're all looking at you, and we're waiting for you to step up and to be the leader of the organization, and you're, like, looking around like somebody's going to come and save you and do it for you. And I won't say it was as easy as an aha moment, but that was a turning point for me, in that leadership kind of found me, I guess you would say, there. And so the mindset that I had to adopt was actually one of service, but through putting myself in front rather than behind. That I could follow other people, but I had to follow them in a way that was still leading them. And that was something that I really had to adjust to and learn. And I'm fortunate because all of my clients are CEOs and founders, and so I was able to kind of rely on their modeling of what that looks like, and say, oh yeah, I have to be responsible, and what being responsible to the business means, what being a good steward means, is actually being declarative, having an opinion, and being willing to put myself out there and be kind of the target of business. So that's probably one of my biggest mindset ahas, I think, as I stepped into leadership.
Yeah, and that's really important. I think two of the things that you've mentioned so far is that mindset shift that you've had to have, and the fact that 60%, I believe you said 60% of startups fail due to people issues.
Yeah.
So, it kind of lends this idea of you can have the great idea, you can have the next big thing, but if you as the founder aren't up to it, or maybe you even have the skills for it, but you don't have the belief in it, you're never going to be able to make it something bigger than it needs to be, or bigger than yourself.
Well, and I might even say that back to you in my own words, which is something that I've observed in other companies and then observed it so acutely and painfully in myself, is that founders tend to create their businesses in their own image. And so whatever is going on inside of our heads starts actually playing out in the organizational dynamics. It's almost like that movie Inside Out, but like, how it's a town, I think it is, in that movie, that's kind of like the inside of this person's head. That's what I think of as companies now, is that we're actually just kind of playing a part in the founder's psychology. And so as you're saying, like getting to where it needs to go, right, or like whatever the business needs to become, our own limitations and our own psychology is what holds the company back also, right? Like whatever our personality and characteristic palette is, like that becomes the culture and the system that is in the company. And so as I've been walking through this myself, I say when I can't, one of my kind of personal struggles is accepting money has always been like sort of a struggle in my life, which for a business owner is a really bad struggle to have. Money is the lifeblood of your company. And so I see it all the time in the way I structure contracts, or the way that I have conversations, or the way that the sales team operates. I can see my problems with money playing out. So it's one of the reasons that we do the work that we do as systems coaches, is actually trying to illuminate what is the pattern in the system, and then draw it back into the awareness of the founder and the leadership team and the people who participate, and say by raising your awareness about this pattern in yourself, but also out in the company, then you are empowered to make a different choice.
Absolutely. So for any new founders who may have the ambitions of being their own boss, have the ambitions of serving all these people, but may have some sorts of limiting beliefs, what is something that you would tell them to start to get over those limiting beliefs and do the thing?
Yeah, I think the trickiest part is getting the awareness. And I like to say awareness is necessary but not sufficient for change, right? It's not the whole story, but without having the awareness of how your psychology is playing into the way that you're forming your business, it's really hard to get into that place of making a choice. And one of the ways that we like to do it on our team is by getting in a group process. And what that means is that we get into a room, all of us who are in the company, and we sort of pay attention to the dynamics that we're playing out. And as a leader in the room, I'm watching for the things that feel familiar to me. And so I'm actively trying to develop that awareness of where is something that comes from me holding the company back. Of course, another great way to do that is in therapy or coaching, right, with someone who's skilled at observing that. 360 evaluations are a great way to get a mirror back to you about how you're being received by others or how you're impacting a system. But even just the intention, like if someone listens to this, it'll be hard to unhear that your psychology is playing out in the business. At least when I started thinking that way, it's like you can't help but start to see it. And as you start to see it, then you raise your awareness. And then the question is, what do you do with that awareness?
I think there's a tendency for a lot of founders to kind of get rose-colored lenses or have this blindness to maybe their weaknesses or some of the soft spots in their psyche that could be affecting the business. So how can one open their mind up to looking for those things?
It's really hard, right? Because our entire personality structure is usually created around trying not to see the stuff that's hard about ourselves. Some people talk about it like the shadow, right? Or it's like a character armor or an ego defense or something like that. And so, our entire psychology is built around trying to avoid becoming aware of those things. And so I might say the same thing, that having a partner in that can be really helpful. One of the weird specialties I fell into in the last few years was working with married founders. Married founders are amazing because they know each other so well that they can act as that mirror for one another. They can say, oh, you're doing that thing you do, but you're doing it at work too. And that's almost true for every founder I've ever talked to, that the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Any awareness you're having, like when you sit down for a meal with your family, right, and you start to notice the way your family operates, ask yourself, do I notice this dynamic at work? And that's starting probably to get into those kind of unknown unknowns. The easiest way to do that is with someone who's outside of ourselves, who can see us more clearly than we can see ourselves there. Because usually we're like super expert at hiding that stuff from ourselves.
Okay. And so how at the Heartwood Collective do you guys sort of start helping founders find that about themselves and then fix it?
Yeah, I would say usually folks come to us when they've experienced a little bit of pain already, and they might not yet have the awareness, but they have usually some sense that something's not right. And it's usually something outside of themselves, like the team's not executing properly, or we never hit our targets, or we're having trouble getting the next round, or sometimes it's about org design, right? And like kind of what a shit show it can be when you don't have people in the right seats. So usually there's some sort of pain. And then our job is to start reflecting on the pain and where it's coming from. We usually do that by having what we call drop-in coaching. It's kind of like office hours with a company. And we start to build a perspective on what's going on in the company that might be causing the pain that the founder's feeling. And then on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, we're reflecting that back to the founder. And we're saying, here's what we're hearing in the organization. And we might start then prompting, does anything here feel familiar to you? Or we might even make the observation and say, hey, the way that you just talked to us about this meeting or this moment or this situation seems to be really similar to what we're hearing from the larger organization. So we're starting to gently kind of pull the thread between self-awareness and system awareness. But like all things that are in that unknown, right, or that shadow part of ourselves, we have to move slowly. Because if you move too quickly and you go at the thing, usually the defenses will actually get stronger and it'll get harder and harder to have the awareness. So with a lot of care and time and team, that's usually the way that we start walking that path with founders.
Founders view the world in a different way than a normal 9-to-5 or someone who can just sit there behind a desk all day. And what I found is that there's a lot of people who have the ambition to start their business, but only a few people that are crazy enough to actually do it. But the ones that are crazy enough to do it also seem to self-sabotage a lot. So how can the ones that actually want to be able to take that risk avoid that self-sabotage early in the business so that they don't eventually quit and have to go back to the normal 9-to-5 that they desperately want to leave?
It probably depends on the self-sabotage. I wonder if there's an example that comes to mind for you that we could dig into for a second.
Yeah, so for me personally, I always gave myself excuses like, oh, I gotta pay for this, I have not enough time for this, oh, I'm young, I want to travel a little bit or whatever the case may be. But I was always giving myself some sort of excuse until I finally decided, hey, I'm self-sabotaging right now. I know what I need to do. I'm not doing it.
When you said that you knew what you needed to do, that was in service of something that you really wanted. Was there any conflict that you could become aware of in what you wanted? Like
What do you mean?
wanted it, but you also didn't want it?
I think for me, the biggest thing was I knew I wanted it. I wanted it a lot, but I was scared of the possibility of failure and then, letting the world know that I failed, letting myself know that I failed, and letting my family know that I failed.
Yeah, so it's like, I want this, and I'm afraid that if I go after the thing that I want, I won't get it, and that will be more painful than maybe not having tried in earnest. So what you're pointing out is super common for all of us, which is that usually a want is paired with, and sometimes I say, like, we as coaches or therapists wouldn't have to exist if people could say, I want that, and then they just go get it, right? That would be amazing. But most humans are quite complicated, and the reason that we're complicated is because we developed, we call them creative adjustments, but in childhood we developed a set of beliefs or a set of practices to keep ourselves safe. And sometimes that meant that we had to adjust who we were or what we believed that we could do so that we could stay connected to our parents. And like when you're a kid, that's survival, right? Like if your parents throw you out on the street, like your chances of survival go way down. And so staying connected to those figures in your life becomes of supreme importance. And so we might say, all right, I have to do everything perfectly in order to earn my parents' love. And so anytime I'm not perfect, I feel like I might die. And if I start to develop those beliefs, then I start to do something like start a business, and it hits me all at once that if I start this business, I'm not going to be able to do it perfectly. And so I really want to start the business. And at the same time, every time I get closer to taking that risk, I feel like I might die. And so we have to start tearing those things apart from one another, right? The thing that I want and the fear that I have, and place that fear kind of back where it belongs, which is like, wow, I developed that fear when I was 2, right? And my parents wanted me to be perfect at things, but I was a toddler, and so I wasn't perfect at things. And then I thought they were going to leave me on the street, and I felt like I was going to die. And now I still feel that way. And as we start to create that exploration and that awareness of where that feeling is coming from, most founders find that it unhooks them from the belief. And they're freer then to go after the things that they want. But it's it's one of those kind of arduous processes of uncovering all of those linked beliefs and where they came from and the painful way that they sit in our bodies. It's not as simple as wanting something, right? It's much more complicated than that, in understanding that getting what I want might create or make me sit with in my life.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. I really want to ask you a question because, you mentioned it was 10 years ago where you finished your PhD. So your business, relatively young in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah.
So you've been around in this business during the age of social media, during the age of COVID, during the age of AI. So tell us a little bit about how adaptable someone might need to be to kind of just fight through these punches that we have that we can't control. The technological advancements, in my opinion, have been great, but they could also be hindrances. So yeah, just how can we be adaptable to the ever-changing atmosphere of the world?
Yeah, I think about humans being pretty maladapted animals, right? We're not really good at being outside. We're not really good at killing things without tools. We're like kind of not great at surviving. It's like humans are not great animals, to be honest. But the thing that we are really good at is adapting, and things like tool use or using our brains to understand different contexts and change our behavior. That is what has allowed us to thrive as a species. And so I think it's the same in the landscape now, right? If we can be aware of our environments and understand what is needed from us and start to shift our brains and shift our capacities, then we can hang with whatever's coming our way. Our company personally has, say, with the development of AI, we've seen, I think, both sides of the coin, in that there are many ways in which our utilization of AI has hugely increased our productivity. It's made us better, it's made us smarter, it's made us faster. We're able to operate at a much higher level with much less investment. It's been amazing. And at the same time, I think we're contending now with AI bots that do coaching, right? And it's maybe bringing like a looking in the mirror moment of saying, like, what is it that I bring that's different than an AI bot that knows everything in the world, right? Like, is it really about knowledge? Like, is it knowledge transfer that I bring to the people I work with? Is it actually like an understanding of how business works that allows me to work with a system, right? Or is there something different about being a human? And I think it's really like brought us down to the base principle of what it is that we're doing and what is the value of being a human here. And that's a pretty serious question to ask, and one that probably people in past iterations of company building didn't have to ask, right? Because the nature of the technology around them was different. But I would say, yeah, we're somewhere in between, feeling so gifted by all of the technology around us, and also feeling really confronted by it in an existential way.
I think there's one thing that we'll always be able to differentiate a human versus the AI, and that is empathy. AI will never be able to empathize with another human being or connect with another human being like a human can. And there's also this idea of AI being a little too perfect. When you're reading a college essay, for example, you're reading any sort of LinkedIn post or blog now, there's no grammatical errors. Everyone sounds the same. The sentence structures are always the same. And you start to pick it up pretty easily. And maybe AI will get to a point where it's hard for us to pick it up. But as far as it is right now, is that the perfection that AI brings is almost a detriment in the fact that it's not human. The flaws of humans make us unique, and that connection that we all have in each other through our flaws is something that I think an AI robot will never be able to replicate.
That's a beautiful perspective. There was just some findings that were coming to mind that in some of the early therapy chatbots that were created, so this is before AI was as sophisticated as it is now, the finding was that people who were going to a bot therapist actually had warm feelings and even love feelings towards the robot, and felt understood by and cared for by the robot. They reported high levels of a working alliance, which is the way that we would determine how well that relationship is going. And this was pretty confronting to me when I first heard about this happening, right? Because I thought kind of the same thing you said, right? Like empathy and like human connection, that's a thing that can only be done by a human. But it turned my mind around a little bit in that human connection, if it's two-sided, that's true. But so much of the connection that people seek is actually through their own lens. It's almost like a reflection of me back to me through you. And AI is brilliant at that. It's brilliant at affirming what you want to see in yourself, or to have something that you'd like to hear said back to you. It's brilliant at that. It knows how to stay in coherence with a being. And so in our
That's
work,
a great perspective.
what we say is actually more human is that as a human, I can be impacted by you. Like, you can hurt me, you can disappoint me, you can confuse me, I can challenge you, right? And that's a thing that AI currently doesn't do as well. And that's actually being impacted. It can pretend to be impacted, right? It can learn to act as if it's impacted. But the way in which we actually poke each other or get into conflict with one another or get under each other's skin, those are the ingredients of intimacy. And I would say that's a thing that still has seen AI quite crack the code.
Do you think it will?
I have no idea. I have seen AI already do things that I never thought were possible. And so I'm technologically optimistic that pretty much anything we can imagine can happen. But almost anything that does happen with AI will be a simulation, right? And like you said, when I read something and I can tell that it's written by AI, and I probably not always could tell you how I know, but somehow it feels to me like it's missing something, like what I would call the soul or the voice of the writing. And there may be something there that can never be replicated. I'm not sure.
There's this theory, it's called the uncanny valley. I'm sure you've probably heard it. I think it's a psychological theory, but have you heard of it? So it's this idea that with robots, something that's eerily similar to a human gives us this eerie feeling. When we see a robot that looks too human, but we can tell that there's something quite not human about it, and we feel really uneasy about it. And it sort of comes from this evolutionary idea that there could have possibly been something in some point of our ancestry that was almost human that we should be afraid of, whether that be another species. Maybe I'm a big believer that there could be a possibility that thousands and thousands of years ago we had a civilization that was way more advanced than we are. But there's something in our human evolution that leads to the idea that, hey, we should feel a little off about something that's almost human but not quite. And I think that is probably going to be the thing that essentially saves humanity from AI in a sense. And it's we could get down a really dark, deep rabbit hole in all of that. But it's a really interesting idea to think of.
I love that as a framework for an idea that I think of sometimes, which is, at least in the world that I live in, the only thing that saves coaching and therapy, for example, from being taken over by AI is the choice of other humans, right? Like, as long as humans continue to choose humans, my work, my vocation continues to exist. And if humans stop choosing humans, then I go away, as in the vocation that I'm in. I think that's an interesting place to be, right? As people, like, I watch myself all the time. Am I going to choose the AI solution or the human solution, right? Am I going to do this manually, or am I going to have it done for me? When I'm writing, it's way faster to go with AI, but I miss out on the transformational journey of having written and produced something. And maybe I also miss out on the opportunity of impacting others and being impacted by the process. And so I just get to make a choice. And it'll be interesting to see what we as humanity at large choose as we get further down this path.
You said something really interesting. You said if you write it with AI, you miss out on the opportunity to create something. And that is one thing that I have sort of felt a little afraid of, is this over-reliance on AI has sort of minimized creativity. I feel like, especially with the younger generation, the kids who are in high school right now, I'm sure none of them write any of their essays on their own. None of them are thinking of these ideas on their own. So this over-reliance of AI has been a little scary to think about in that sense. I want to sort of talk about how important that is to, continuously choose to create and be that right now and for future generations to come.
Makes me think of one of the groups that our collective worked with was an accelerator for musical artists. And we were brought in because oftentimes the musical creation journey is based in the pain of the artist creating the music. You've heard the trope of a tortured artist, for example. And so we were brought in to say, like, hey, do you have to be tortured to be an artist, right? Or could artists heal themselves and still create? And I think about something that there's a concept that Freud developed in Western psychology, this idea of sublimation, which is actually the creation process is a part of our own development and our own healing. And so, I guess we've now landed at the question of, like, what is the purpose of life? It's just a small question, but if the purpose of life is to produce as much as you can, then AI is definitely the way. If the purpose of life is to live a fulfilling and meaningful life, and one in which you're impacted and impact other people, then we must choose humans over and over and over again, right? Let's choose ourselves as creators, because that is the process of self-awareness, that is the process of healing, that is the process of connecting. And if we don't know and we stay ambivalent, then, we kind of stay in the inquiry that I feel you in here, maybe in the podcast, which is like, and how are people approaching all of this, right? Just staying in curiosity around the flip-flop between an uncanny being, that makes me shake a little bit inside, but also speeds me up and makes me superhuman.
There's this quote, and I quote Alex Hormozy a lot, but it seems to be continuously relevant. But he answered that question, what is the meaning of life? And he said it's to continuously learn. It's just learning. And I think that leads right to your idea as well, is to continuously choose to be human, continuously grow. And AI can be a beautiful tool to help us on the path of learning and continue, but this over-reliance may be an issue. So continuing to choose is absolutely essential. So with that being said, how do we do that? How do we not take the easy way out?
Man, this is one of those great questions that like, I wish as humans it was easy for us to choose the value-directed action. Like I can sit here, we've just had this nice conversation, and I'm kind of doubling down in my own head on like, oh yeah, I should write all my own articles, right? Because like there's something really beautiful about that creation process. And, I can remember all of the articles that I wrote before the existence of AI and the research process and how arduous it was and how much I was transformed and how rich the process really was, how enriching it was for me. And yet I got to get out 2 pieces of content a week or, whatever the thing is, like in that moment, how do I not choose the easier way? I wish there was a simple answer to that, but just as I was saying it, to me, it feels like it's about values, being really clear about values and maybe also purpose. Like, why do I do all of this? What do I show up to work for? Why do I show up for the people in my life? What am I hoping will happen by my existence here? And almost if we were to take every decision that we make and put it against that purpose and that set of values, that maybe we have a fighting chance at making the harder choice every now and again.
Absolutely. I don't think we should only choose humans. I think we should choose humans time and time again. I think one of the things that's really important is to use the tools that are given to us. AI is a beautiful, beautiful tool that has actually, in my opinion, if used correctly, has opened us up to being able to do the things that actually bring us joy. So you're obviously very passionate about the psychology of entrepreneurship. I can tell just by talking to you. But you probably don't like the minutia of admin work, right? That's where I think AI can be such a beautiful tool, is that the more time you can take away from the boring, mundane taxes, workbooks, those things, the more time you can actually create something beautiful. And that's really my goal with AI. I'm an AI guy, I love it, but I'm very cognizant of the idea of keeping that human element, because I think that's the only thing that'll survive. And I actually spoke with another founder, also a university. It's a sales coaching university for home improvement companies. And one thing that he mentioned that I thought was such a great point was eventually the human element is going to be the competitive advantage. If everything is done by AI and everyone's doing it the same, then you have no competitive advantage. Then you become the competitive advantage again. And I do think that time will absolutely be there. Hey, yeah, we use the AI for to keep things efficient, but you still have me. So very, very important there.
I like that. I like that way of thinking about it a lot, that it becomes actually just the new table stakes, right? And then what do we do on top of that?
Yeah. Let's shift the conversation a little bit more towards your business and kind of outside of, creating the content and that sort of things. What sort of ways are you guys using AI within the business?
Yeah, so the main, I would say the most interesting way that we're using AI now is to help us with data analysis. So one of the things that we have been doing for the last almost 10 years, I guess, is taking in a bunch of information from organizations. We do that through coaching conversations, interviews, observation, just being around, emails, all of those sorts of things. And then, like I was saying, part of our work is to create the awareness for the founder and the leadership team of how what's going on inside of them might be playing out in the business. And that used to be a very manual process. You can imagine me in a coffee shop with a stack of papers like this that I've written all the observations and themes on, and then I'm organizing them into piles, right? And then I'm moving the piles around and putting them on top of other piles to create a framework, and then mirroring that back to folks. And the sheer amount of time and effort that it took to do that meant that we couldn't be in a continuous process of learning with the founding teams. And AI has hugely sped that up. One, it can take in way more information than we can as humans in a much more economical way. And then it also can learn from us, of course, how to crunch that data and reflect it back. And so we've been really partnering with AI in that world to intake better data, to analyze it in a more efficient way, and then even partnering with AI in how do we reflect that back, right? So what can we understand about the people that we're communicating with, and use an AI intermediary to say, how could we say this in a way that avoids all of their shadows, right, as we were talking about earlier? Like, how do we make this message palatable for the people that we're trying to reflect it back to? Because like I said earlier, what we've noticed is that AI is incredibly good at being in coherence. So that's actually one of its main strengths, right? Is like, how do you say a thing in a way that someone can receive and feel good about? And so we've also really partnered with AI and how to, even in the way I just said that, right? Like our partnership with AI is important, right? That we're actually involved every step of the way as humans, but it speeds us up and increases the breadth of information that we can work with, which has been pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see how, that's the perfect way of using AI, in my opinion. Is just being able to speed up the processes that you don't need to spend that much time on for no reason. I'm a sales guy. I've been in sales for the last 10 years. One of the things for me was always like admin work, right? Just follow up and qualifying and doing research on every company beforehand. And the introduction of AI into that has been such a game changer because not only do I have more solid information before each call, or I have more time to worry about actually providing value to my clients. It's helped in so many ways to where now the 2 hours a day that I spent doing admin work takes me 15 minutes. And the extra 2 hours that I have, I can speak to more clients, provide more value, raise more revenue, more commissions, all of that. So I think just from a delivery standpoint from you guys, a business standpoint, from the sales perspective, there's so many avenues that AI can just revolutionize how we run our business.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, it's got to be a partnership, right?
So I want to ask you, you've worked with numbers of entrepreneurs so far, and you've been able to help them find their weak points or soft spots that may be hindering their businesses and fix them. What is one thing that you find the most amongst entrepreneurs that you would like to kind of nip in the bud right away before they even need to come to you?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, my kind of annoying psychology answer is everybody's so different. It would be hard to say like what's the one thing. But when you said that, there was one thing that popped into my mind. And I don't know if it's the most common even. I haven't done an evaluation on that, but there's something that I've been noticing with founders quite a bit that I think could hugely change the way that they lead and also the experience that they have in leading. And actually, I think AI can help them with it, which is kind of a cool dovetail to the last bit of the conversation we were having, which is that founders take in so much information on any given day. They're responsible for a system, and systems are infinitely complex. Like one human is complex. Anyone who's in a romantic relationship knows that being connected to one other human is enough to occupy you, maybe even for a lifetime, of trying to figure it out and get it right. And then think about that multiplied over hundreds or thousands, tens of thousands of people, right? That's a company. And not only are we just existing with each other, but also we're trying to get something done, right? So it's just infinitely complex. And founders often are housing all of this within their brains and within their bodies. And the thing that I notice founders really struggling with is how to discern or sift through all that information, finding the signal for the noise, right? Figuring out what's most important, what to care about, what not to care about, how to be a values-driven person while also not attending to every single fire that's happening around them all the time. And so that discernment process, I think, is something that if I could wave a magic wand and teach every founder how to weed through all of the data that they're taking in any given moment and choose what's most important, I would give that skill to every founder. And again, I think AI can be an incredible tool for helping sort through some of that stuff, especially alongside doing some work to understand what's most important and how to navigate that within yourself. Maybe a psychology AI partnership there as well.
Absolutely. That's great. I mean, I love getting people's perspectives on that. I ask that same kind of question to almost everyone I speak to, and I get a different answer every time. And it's really beautiful because, like you said, it's hard to say because everyone's so different. But anytime I get an answer, I'm like, oh yeah, that probably applies to everybody, I've gotten listening, I've gotten being influential. Like, there's so many different things. But I love your answer. That was the first time I've heard something like that, and I agree full-heartedly that is incredibly important. So I've had a really good time so far, Kari. I just want to ask you a few more questions, and then I'd love for you to, give us an idea of where to find you and everything. But first, let's say just a quick rapid fire type of thing, just first thing that pops into your mind. What's the most powerful mind shift a mindset shift a founder can have that will bring the most immediate results?
I think seeing themselves as the source of their business. So seeing their business as autobiographical, and once the founder starts seeing that, then everything else becomes a choice.
Amazing. Awesome. And when you say, seeing themselves as their business, what's the easiest way to take a step out of that and get to a point where you don't have to see yourself like that?
Yeah, that's interesting that you said it that way, seeing yourself as your business. I would think about it like the business is a projection of what's inside. And I would also double down on the next part, which is and it's important to not get confused that the business and you are the same thing. And I don't know what the fastest or easiest way to disentangle those two things are. I'll say I'm up to my eyeballs in entanglement with my own business, and I would say I haven't cracked that one yet. But what I see in people who have healthy differentiation is that they have some practice of reminding themselves that their business is a project, or that their business exists outside of themselves, or that they'll be okay if their business isn't okay, and almost even using the words or self-talk to help remind them that there's distance here, and that even that's a choice. But I'm under no delusion that there's a fast or easy way to do that. That
Right.
Once you get entangled with something that really matters to you, I think the disentanglement process takes effort.
Absolutely. What's something that you do to kind of keep yourself grounded and get to that point for yourself in your business?
I really rely on my colleagues, actually, I'm constantly in consultation with them about how I'm being and how I'm seeing the business, and I'm getting myself reflected back to me all the time. I also do that by having a therapist and a coach and those that I meet with, and just all sorts of opportunities for someone to reflect me back to me so that I can see myself with fresh eyes. To me, those are the practices that keep me really grounded.
I keep getting this common theme from you and from other founders that I've spoken to, and it's this idea of connection to your colleagues, clients, and the people around you. Let's talk about how important that is.
Wow, I don't even know how to express its importance, but to me, being together is the way that humans are built. I think we're built to be in relationship. We're social creatures. In fact, it's one of our survival imperatives is to be connected. Even in having conversations and hearing each other's voice tones, we're co-regulating each other's nervous systems. Right? My sense of well-being is increased by just having a conversation with you. And so I can't even imagine what it would look like to be a human not connected.
Absolutely.
I think the studies would say, seeing the mother monkey studies in psychology or something like that, right? That a baby monkey will find even a wooden mother with a sheet over it to be an important part of their development process if there's no live mother available. So I see in everything that we do, we're seeking connection.
Absolutely. I think as solo entrepreneurs, a lot of solo entrepreneurs struggle with that.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning stages of their business where they're doing everything alone. They might not have a team yet. Being able to find that sort of camaraderie, whether that be, other communities of people doing the same thing, whether that be coaching, whether it be mentorship, whatever the case, I think it's incredibly important to have that. Being able to just bounce ideas off of each other, being able to, like you say, have people kind of put a mirror up in front of you. So yeah, it's incredibly important. I think just as humans, it's important in every aspect of life, much less business. So I love that. I've had a great conversation so far, Doctor. I think this has been amazing. I would love to have you on at some point in the future as well. For the audience listening now, how can we connect with you and how can we get in touch with Heartwood?
Yeah, you can find us through our website. It's thehwc.com, theheartwoodcollective.com, and my team answers the emails that come through there. I'll also just say, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. If you want a free coaching session, you can go on there and say, find a coach. And that goes directly into one of the calendars of one of the coaches on our team. It's a great place to have a connection with someone who knows how to listen and be a human with other humans. And we'll also help you find a coach if that's what you're looking for there. So that's a great place to find us. I'm on LinkedIn. That's a place that I'm often kind of hanging out and answering messages. And yeah, I'd love to continue this conversation with anyone who's listening and wants to go deeper.
Absolutely. Amazing. Well, like I said, thank you so much, Dr. Kari. I had a great time. For anyone listening or any of our audience members, if you have any topics or things you'd like us to cover, please leave them in the comments below. If you have anyone that you would like to jump on the podcast, please let me know. And don't forget to subscribe. Dr. Kari, thank you so much.
It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.